What is up, friends, and welcome back to From the Mind of Dick. Hope everything is going well for you wherever you may be. Thank you so much for the support on the last episode of everybody like the Ronar house. I've been planning that one for a while, and I took a bunch of notes and then thought I kind of covered most of the crazy shit we did. But then after doing the episode and people listening to it, they were like, well, what about this? Why didn't you talk about this? And I was like, oh shit, there's so many other stories that I missed. So there will definitely be a part 2 on that coming soon. As for today, I wanted to talk about another Lake L.A. story, place that was really important to me growing up in Lake L.A., a place that a lot of our friends worked, a place that was kind of the center of town and just was like the spot to hang out for the longest time out there. It was just the spot, right? And of course, I'm talking about the Lake L.A. Dairy. I worked there for a really long time. I think it was like 6 years. I worked there for about 5 years, something like that, 5 or 6 years. And then I left for a little bit, went down to the liquor store down the street, N&M Liquor. And then I came back for about another year. So I think a total like 7 years I worked there. But all of our homies worked there at one time. And for those of you that are like newer friends and like didn't grow up in Lake L.A., so what the dairy was, it was like a gas station, I guess, but it had like a drive-through. So basically the way the drive-through worked is the cars would pull up and then we would go out and take their order. We'd walk out to the car, take their order and fulfill their order that way, right? They can go back in the store, get their shit and take it out to them, right? So that's how the drive-through worked. So that's why it was so popular, because people could just drive through and get their shit. Like you can get whatever you want. You can get beer. They made you step out of the car for the beer, but you can still order beer through the drive-through. You could get whatever you wanted in the store, right? And then there was like 4 gas pumps in the front. So a lot of people came and got gas there. So yeah, it was like, it was kind of the spot, right? Like it was the spot where people hung out. And I worked there for a long time, like I said, and the kids used to skateboard in the back. Skateboard. I sound old when I say they used to skateboard, but they used to skate in the backs of the dairy, and there was this gap that they called the dairy gap, and they would try to. It was basically there's a shopping center next to the dairy, and there was a kind of a little gap in between, and it was a really challenging gap for these skaters because they were still, not professional, right? And so it was kind of, I don't know how long it was, but it was like a good sized gap, and you had to kind of go over a curb and then down to try to land it. And it was super challenging. So they would all line up and skate the back of the dairy and then try to get enough speed so they could make the dairy gap. And that was something that they were doing like, honestly, like daily. But it's kind of a funny story how I ended up working at the dairy. I thought I'd tell that to start this off. So I was working at, my very first job I got was at the 99-cent store that was like right down the street, right? Like there was the bank right there. My mom worked at the AV bank, and then right next to it was a 99-cent store. So that was my first job. They changed it to like Prince's Market or something like that because the people that bought it, their last name was Prince. And they turned it into like more of a market. Like they ended up expanding into the building next door and making it into more of like a market, and it wasn't like a 99-cent store anymore. And people in Lake L.A. hated that. Like they loved having a 99-cent store where basically everything was like $1. But they changed it to be more than that, had this idea of making it into a market, right? So I worked there for a while, and one day they called me into the office and they were like, we have to let you go. And I said, well, what did I do? And they said, well, you sold cigarettes to your friends that are under 18. I said, no, I didn't. I said, I never did that. And I knew that I was never going to do that. Like I even told my friends that were under 18, like, you're not going to get cigarettes from me. Like, you're not going to get it. So they said, well, we have you on camera. I said, can I see the tape? And they said, well, we don't have to show it to you. And I said, well, I didn't do that. So why are you saying you got me on camera when you didn't? They're like, well, one of your friends came in and tried to buy cigarettes and we carded him, and he said that he was, he always buys them here and everybody here sells them to him. And I was like, yeah, if that's the case, then you need to fire them because I don't sell it to him. I know he's only 17. And they were like, well, we're just going to have to let you go. And I was like, but you can't, why are you letting me go? Like I was arguing with him. I was like, I didn't do that. If they assumed that he was 17 or if they assumed that he was 18 without carding him, that's on them. Why aren't they getting fired? They're the ones selling him cigarettes. Why are you firing me for them selling him cigarettes? That doesn't make sense. Oh, well, he's your friend and he came in and tried to buy cigarettes. And I was like, that's on him. Like I had nothing to do with any of this. I didn't even know about it. And anyway, turns out that they had just hired their daughter and they needed the hours. Like everyone that worked there was kind of older and had families and stuff. And I was just a 18-year-old kid, probably 18, almost 19-year-old kid. And I was like the lowest man on the totem pole, lowest little boy on the totem pole. So they had to get rid of me. So I was pissed off though. I was like, fuck this. Like I didn't even do anything wrong. Like I was enjoying making my $4 an hour, and it was great to have some spending money and not have to ask my dad for money. So it was nice. So that day I was fucking pissed off. So I walked down the street and I walked to the dairy. Like I said, everybody used to hang out at the dairy. It was kind of just the spot. And then I told the lady that was working there, who I knew pretty well, her name was Tina. I told her what happened, and she was just like, well, you want to work here? She's like, that's bullshit. You want to work here? And I was like, yeah, I mean, fuck yeah. She's like, well, let me talk to the boss. Let me talk to Jim and see if, he'll hire you. Long story short, I talked to Jim and he knew my mom from the bank. Everybody knew my mom at the bank, and he hired me. So that's how I got the job at the dairy. Was like I got fired from the 99-cent store, walked down the street the same day, basically got hired at the dairy. And it was a cool job. I mean, the boss Jim was kind of dirty. Like he was I don't know if anybody remembers him, but he was like an older guy, and any woman that came in that was halfway good looking, that was around his age, he would just totally try to hit on. And he was like this dirty old man, and he always had like a backwoods cigar in his mouth, and he always smelled like cigar. And he'd come talk to you to get up close, and you just smell his fucking nasty cigar breath. But he never smoked a cigar. He just always had it in his fucking mouth. And the backwoods, I tried it one time to see what the appeal was, and I could see why he liked doing it. He just liked sucking the juice off of it, and he got the tobacco and the nicotine out of it. And he always had one, and he'd leave them just sitting around, because if someone would come in, he'd just set it on the counter because he didn't want to have it in his mouth while he was talking to people. And they'd just be sitting there, and sometimes he'd forget them, and they'd be sitting there for hours. And then he'd leave sometimes, just his fucking cigar, his nasty-ass cigar would be sitting on the fucking counter. But he was kind of a fucked up old man. He used to call me Rag. And the reason he called me that was because we would drop money in the safe, right? When we'd get like a bunch of 20s or big bills, we'd drop money in the safe. And we'd have to initial it. So I'd always put Rag 2. And after a while, that's what he started calling me, was Rag 2. And on the schedule, that's what he would write, is Rag 2. So he just always called me Rag. And that became my nickname. I tell you that story because my Instagram handle is Rag 2, right? So that's where I got it, was because when I was at the dairy, that's what my name was at the dairy, right? It was Rag 2. So when I thought of an Instagram handle, I was like, that's cool, and Rag 2, right? It's my initials, and I'm a junior. So Rag number 2. So anyway, so that was the boss. He was kind of a weird dude. He wasn't there very long. Very much. He was there the whole time I worked there, until I came back the second time. But I'll tell that story in a little bit. But he would only come in for maybe 2 to 4 hours a day. He'd get there, he's 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and then he'd leave. I think he owned a painting business, so he'd go and check on his workers that painted for him and stuff. But that's what he did. That was his main thing. But he worked at the dairy and basically took care of the business side of things. And he had people that worked there taking care of the management side of things, dealing with vendors and dealing with orders and making sure the store ran well. I was that guy at one time. So the first few years I worked there, there wasn't really a lot of interesting stories that I could really tell. The only one I thought of was that there was these guys that were they were living at a halfway house there in Lake L.A. And they had been in some trouble with the law. They'd been to jail. They'd been on drugs. A couple of them were from the San Fernando Valley. There was this guy, Joey, that he was from Orange County area. He actually used to hang out with like bunch of guys that were in punk bands in like the OC area. Pennywise, he had pictures of him with like partying with Pennywise. He knew the guys in Sublime. Before Bradley passed away, he said, you know, he knew Brad and he used to go to their shows. He knew like Slightly Stupid. He knew all these guys, right? Like he just would show me like, and that's all I can think of off the top of my head. But he had this photo album. I want to say it was like more than one photo album. He busted it out one time to show me. And he's like, look, here's this guy. He had all these pictures of him partying with like all these guys. And he used to tell me stories about like Fletcher from Pennywise, how much he liked to party and how crazy he was, which is true. Like I've heard tons of stories, but this is before I knew all these other stories. Like he knew all these guys, right? So Joey was like the surfer, like skater kid from like the OC, right? Like the typical guy, the way he talked, the way he, you know, the way he dressed, everything like that, right? And, you know, he became, you know, me and him became really good friends. He was telling me all these stories about like going to punk rock shows and we'd listen to the same music. So he became a good friend of mine. The other two guys were like these gangster fools from like the Valley, right? One guy was this like Mexican dude, and I don't remember his name. I think it was like Daniel or Danny or something like that. He was, you know, I didn't really talk to him a lot. The other guy's name was Kyle, and he was this white dude, had this big, thick mustache, right? And tattoos on his neck, like a lot of the prison tattoos they look like. But he was maybe under 30, just under 30, maybe 27, 28. And at the time, I think I was like 20 when they worked there. And I remember him being just like the coolest guy, right? Like he always was trying to give me like life advice, like don't end up like me, like do this, do this, do this. I know the shit I did wrong and I'm trying to make up for that. And during that time is when I found out I was going to be a dad for the first time, and I was freaking the fuck out because I wasn't ready to be a dad at 20 years old. Like I just wanted to party. That's all I was doing, and found out I was going to be a dad. And he was telling me stuff like, oh yeah, I was your age when, you know, I had my first kid and I don't get to see her anymore because of the shit I've done. And I'm trying to work my way back so I can see my daughter and shit like that. I just remember him being like really cool. And he was always giving me life advice, and we were always having these good conversations, right, when we'd work together. And I tell you that story because one day, and I was off this day, I guess the people that were coming in for the 3 o'clock shift, the afternoon shift, they came in and there was customers lined up, but there was no one there. There's people waiting. They're like, is nobody working? There's nobody in the dairy at all. And turns out that these two guys, they didn't drop any money in the safe at all the whole day. They kept all the money they had, which turned out to be only about just under $3,000, I think. And they basically kept all the money, and right before their shift was over, they dipped out before anybody got there. So there's about maybe 20 minutes where nobody was running the dairy and people were coming in going like, what the fuck? So they dipped out. They took off. Apparently they stole a car and took off. And 2 days later, they got caught on their way to Vegas, and I guess they got caught in the stolen car, so they got arrested. And I hadn't heard anything about it. I think it was a few days later the sheriff came in and said that yeah, they caught them and they're going to jail, which pisses me off because like this guy was telling me like don't end up like me. Like I want to get clean. I want to fix my life. That's why I'm at this halfway house, because this is the only place I could be to like fix my life. Way the fuck out here in the middle of the desert, and I'm trying to change my life. And then he goes and fucking robs the dairy. Like, why would you do that to your daughter, right? And that's why I wanted to tell that story, because it's like, that's pretty fucked up, And it just pissed me off when he, I was like really fucking pissed off when he did that. And I never heard from him again, which sucked. But I'll always remember him. I always remember some of the advice he gave me. Like, and I still, I use that advice a lot. Like, don't fuck up. Like, be there for your kid, right? And this guy fucking dipped out and probably never saw his kid again. I don't know if he ever fixed his life. I hope so. I really hope, because he had a good head on his shoulders. He was just made stupid mistakes. And it makes you feel like when you're raised in that, like when you, it's all you really know, I guess, that you make these stupid decisions, right? He could have had a chance and he didn't. But anyway, that was something that happened in the first couple of years I worked there. But eventually I got our friend J-Bone a job there. He was the first one that I got a job there after, a few years of me working there. He started working there. And I think shortly after he started working there, the two of us started working overnight. And I worked overnight at the dairy for, I want to say like 2 years. but I know he was working with me overnight. And then we got in trouble because we would have friends come in and hang out with us, and they were buying shit, and they were, they'd buy sodas and shit like that and candy and stuff. They were paying for stuff, and they were just hanging out with us for like a couple hours at night, because we were there 11 to 7 was the shift, and we were just hanging out with them, right? So I remember Jim calling me in the office and showing me the tape of us just hanging out and fast forwarding, and it was like 2 or 3 hours that we were just hanging out. So we stopped that, and then eventually they ended up closing down the dairy at night, and they installed this like a walk-up window that a lot of stores have, where you can just have like a little bucket you can just put, because basically they were like, okay, well, we're gonna shut down the dairy and have one person work at night instead of two. And I don't know if that was because we were partying or if it was because payroll. I want to say it was to save on payroll. They closed down because they honestly like weren't losing much money to do that, because there wasn't a lot of people that came in overnight. And so to have a one person working, they felt it was safer to have just like a walk-up window and like lockdown. They actually put like bulletproof glass on the front, and it was all bulletproof. Both windows ended up being bulletproof glass. So it felt really safe to be in there. The doors on the sides were bulletproof, so they could have just went around and shot the doors out. So it doesn't matter, but I never had any issues when I was doing it. But that ended up being to where people would come by, and like the cameras, they didn't have any cameras on the one side. They had them on the drive-through side, but not on the other side. So we could just go out there and like hang out and talk, and like you couldn't really see, but we couldn't have anybody in anymore. So yeah, that was kind of something that I did for a while, and working overnight was like, there was a lot of shit to do. And when there was two people doing it, it didn't feel like a lot of work. But once it was just one person, it was like, I had to get a lot of shit done before like 3:00, because by 4:30 is when we started opening the doors, and that's when the rush started coming in, and people started coming in like crazy, getting their coffee in the morning, getting gas, getting coffee, getting their shit for their day before they went to work. And it was just fucking jumping from like 4 a.m. till like 7, right? And so we had to get like all these coffee filters made. Like I had to make a bunch of pre-made coffee filters with coffee in them, so you could just pop them into the thing. So there was 2 pots. So you had to make sure that there was a full pot at all times. So once one was getting empty, you got to make sure you bust out another pot, because people are coming through filling up their coffee mugs. I mean, they're just going through coffee. Like we would go through, I want to say like 15 of those motherfuckers in like 3 hours. So that's a lot of coffee, right? Not making money on coffee, but people are coming in and to get other things while they get their coffee. So that was one of the things you had to do. We had to clean the soft serve machine. We had to fill up all the sodas. We had to clean the soda machine, right? We had to make sure we made bags of ice. So all the bags of ice we sold, we actually we made in the store. So there's an ice machine in the back. We just bagged them all and tied them up. So we had to do that. There's a lot of things we had to do at the dairy that were kind of done at night to make sure everything was nice and full for the next day. Like I even had to like strip and wax the floors. Like they put in brand new floors, and however they did it, like it was shitty, because like people walking through the middle aisle, if you guys remember how it was set up, walking through the middle aisle, like it would just fuck up the whole floor. And like once a week I had to strip and wax the floor. It's like, that's crazy to have someone that just works at night, just an employee just fucking doing a job like that. And I learned how to get really good at it and get it done in like 2 hours. So, cause I had to get it done before the rush. Like I had to be all done, dry, I had fans going. It was crazy. Like I had to do that shit like at least once a week. And sometimes it would get really bad, and he'd say, "You mind waxing the floor tonight?" No, fuck, all right. But yeah, I worked overnight for, like I said, probably like 2 years. And then I started getting a lot of my friends hired. And like I said, Jason was one of the first ones. And slowly it was like this guy, then this guy, then this guy. And then next thing you know, the dairy crew was born. And, we had shirts and stuff made, and it was kind of cool. I don't know if you guys remember those Dairy Crew shirts. I still have one somewhere. But we were basically, it was like everyone that worked there was like the homie. So when we'd go to work, it was like you're hanging out with your friends, and we'd look at the schedule and be like, oh, look, I work with Tim Dog, tomorrow. That's going to be great. You look at who you work with, and, it was just, it ended up becoming fun. And by that time I had gone off of the overnight shift. I did that for like 2 years, but then I decided that I wanted to work in the day. It wasn't working for me anymore. And that's when we were just kind of like, we became kind of a big thing out in Lake L.A. We were the dairy boys. We were the dairy crew, and that's the place, it became like, it was already like kind of the place where everybody went and hung out, but it became like the spot, right? The spot where all the kids would want to come hang out. Like it was a new generation of like skater kids, and they wanted to be cool like us dairy guys, right? Like they would, because they were like, 14. And by this time I was probably like 22, 23. And they wanted to be cool like us, right? And so we were just, everybody in town kind of went through us. If you needed something, we knew a guy, right? If you needed like your car detailed, like I knew like two guys that would do it. If you needed like an amp hooked up in your car or something like that, like I knew a tweaker that would do that for you. We just had hookups all over town. It just became like its own animal, right? Like, and that's where like problems started, right? Like it became where everybody that was coming through, we would start maybe like hooking up our friends with a little discount, right? And it became where like every single motherfucker that came through wanted a fucking discount. It was just like we were trying to be cool, right? We were trying to be cool and like, help this guy out. Like, oh, hey, you give me like, 25 cents for something for, a $3 order. Okay, yeah, it's fine, fine. Then it just became like people I barely knew would come through and hand me like 3 pennies for like, a 12 pack of soda and fucking candy bars and all this stuff. Be like, oh, here's 3 pennies, and laugh about it. And I was like, bro, like you got to do more than that. And oh, come on, it's a homie hookup. The homie hookups became out of control. And then we had to like kind of put an end to those, right? It was like, we were talking about it. I remember one day, I think I was working with J-Bone that day, and we were like, for like 3 hours, 4 hours straight, every single person that came in got a hookup. And it just became out of fucking control. And it was just like, we couldn't do it anymore. So we had to like put an end to it. So I remember one of the first people that I told like, hey, we can't do this anymore. We got in trouble. They're looking at me like, they tried to hand me like nothing for like a big order. And I was like, yeah, it's not enough, bro. And they were like, what do you mean? And this wasn't like one of the good homies. The good homies, like they still got hookups, right? But it was like people we kind of knew, heard that we hook everybody up and decided to come through and get hookups, right? So it didn't last very long where we were just like, fuck that. And people started getting pissed off at us because we wouldn't hook them up. We wouldn't give them shit for basically free, So we put an end to that real quick. Sometimes like I think back about that time, like, man, we were fucked up. Like those people that owned the dairy were pretty fucking cool. Like Jim was kind of a weird guy, but the people that owned it, like Larry and Vicky, I think her name was, they were actually not bad people. And they're just trying to live the American dream. And these kids that they hire are robbing them blind. So we put an end to that real quick. There's things I did at the dairy that I won't get into that made me believe in karma, that makes any sense. Because I feel like I did a lot of shady shit, which I won't get into because I don't want to like incriminate myself. Like the underringing and stuff like that. If you don't know what that is, I'm not going to get into it. But and I'm not saying I did it. But there's shit I did that I feel like my life was shit for a while, where I just thing after thing would happen and it would just be like, fuck, man. I feel like maybe that was karma telling me, because I'm telling you, like ever since I changed my life and started like being a better person, just thinking like, hey, I need to be a better person, and then eventually got sober, I just feel like my life has gotten better. Like there's a lot of shit that still happens, and things are, get fucked up from time to time. But I feel like there was a time where it was just super fucked up, where, I didn't even want to be around anymore. And that's how bad it got. And now I feel like, things have gotten better because I've changed the person I am. I've become like a good person, is try to do good for everybody. And part of it is like shit that I did at the dairy that I totally regret to this day, because they were just trying to live the American dream and own a business, right? And they were getting robbed. And it turns out they weren't just getting robbed by people that worked there. They were getting robbed by, like, Larry was Jim's brother, and you have your brother try to run your business because I think he was a lawyer, so he had like a successful law firm, and he basically had his brother running it, and Jim was stealing thousands from him, and eventually, he got caught. But, I feel bad because like they were just trying to live the American dream, and we were, I'm not saying I'm going to not say I did it, but, they were getting robbed blind, and it's kind of stupid. It's fucked up. And Anything that I did, I 100% want to let you guys know that I regret. I wish I was a smarter kid, but I wasn't, and you can't take it back. But I said in the previous episode that there's times where we would put $5 in the register for two 20 packs and a 12 pack of tall cans, right? Like that's what we would do, and that's fucked up, right? And eventually they had to sell the place because they weren't making money. And that's fucked up. Like they could have had, a great business, a thriving business. That place did money, right? That place was busy. But anyway, I don't want to get too far into that. Like I did some shit that I wish I wouldn't have done. And I want you guys to know that I feel really bad about it. And anybody who did it with me, like I hope you feel bad about that shit too, because it's kind of fucked up. But let's talk about more positive shit. You guys remember when our friend Cole worked there? And this was when the times were really good, when like all of us were homies and we were all just having a great time working at the dairy. It was just the best place to go work, even though I think we're only making like $5 an hour. It was like nothing. I think at one time I was making like $6 an hour, and I was like, yeah, I'm making money. But anyway, our friend Cole, if you guys remember Cole, he was the happiest, nicest. I haven't talked to this guy in years, but he was just the coolest, nicest guy you'll ever meet. And you could never say anything bad about this guy. And he would always just be positive. He was positive all the time. And he worked there for a while. And when he worked there, he started telling everybody, have a happy day. And, I asked him one time, I was like, why is it have a happy day? And he was like, because you could say have a good day, have a great day, have a nice day, but that's all like boring. Like we should all be happy all the time. We should have a happy day. And that kind of became the dairy's like motto, like the mantra of the dairy was like, have a happy day. And again, we even had shirts made, and the little dude on them, I don't know if you guys remember these shirts. I wish I had a picture of them. I might be able to find one, but the little picture on it said, have a happy day. A little picture of Cole on there. I don't know if you guys remember, it was a picture of Cole, a little drawing. But I don't know, because he had like the spiky hair and like it was him on the shirt, but it was have a happy day. And to this day, I'll tell people that. I'll say, have a happy day. And people look at me like, oh, you too. It's different than saying have a nice day or have a good day. Have a happy day. PMA, baby. All of us should have that mindset. Be positive all the time. It's really hard to do because life fucks you up. But, sometimes I think of that, like how Cole never let anything get him down. And he was always such a great dude. And there's times at the Ronar house where he would show up. And I remember one time we had one of those riots in the street that I was talking to you about. And he was one of the guys going back and forth saying, guys, let's just not do this. This is not cool. Like, and I remember him doing that. And he was just trying to be positive the whole thing, but he was like freaking out. And he's like, I just don't want the cops to come and like arrest anybody. Guys, let's just be cool. But I want to shout out to Cole for just being just the coolest dude. But the dairy became like the happiest place on earth. Not Disneyland, it was the dairy, because we were always positive. We were always having a great time. We were always hanging out and partying together, and then we'd go to work, and some of us had to open. I remember us always saying, like, when we'd be partying, being like, oh, fuck, I got to open tomorrow. What time you got to go to work? Oh, I got to go to work at 5. Because at that time, I think the dairy ended up closing down at night. Instead of being open like it was, it would close down from like 2 to 5 or something like that, or from midnight to 5. I don't remember exactly the time, but I remember it would open up at like 5. So you had to be there at like 4:30, and sometimes we'd be partying until 2, and then you had to be at the dairy. And I remember one time I went in there, and I would open a lot, just put it that way, because I was so used to the whole routine of basically the morning rush. So I would open up a lot. And I remember one time I went in and I was still drunk. I don't think I ever stopped drinking. I think I tried to sleep for a little bit, and I maybe slept for an hour or two, and went in at 5, and I was just like still drunk. My eyes were like bloodshot, and I was like, holy shit. And one of the regulars that came in, his name was Steve. He was somebody that actually knew my dad back in the day when they used to party together, and he was living in Lake L.A. It was crazy because he was a customer, and he found that out. I was like, what the fuck? But his name was Steve, and he looks at me, he's like, you're drunk. And I was like, because he was a recovering alcoholic and he knew. And he was like, you're drunk. And I was like, no, dude, I'm just tired. He's like, no, you're drunk. I can smell it on you and I can see it. I've been an alcoholic for over 30 years. I know an alcoholic when I see one. And I was just like, no, I'm good. I'm good. And finally, after a couple hours, I was fine. But it kind of sucked when we had to go open the dairy for a while. But then after all this fun times we had with, just hanging out, I mean, it was just, I can't really say much about what we did. It was just kind of like, we were always there, right? Like the dairy was just our spot. And it was just the spot where everybody would meet and everybody would hang out and everybody would have a good time. And it was the spot where you can get anything. Like the video nook was right across, right? So when we were kids, we would just go get a video and then go to the dairy, get some snacks. And then that was the spot, right? And then we grew up a little older, teenagers, we would just hang out at the dairy. And then because we became kind of this big group and this, like, we were the coolest guys in Lake L.A. I don't know if that's how you want to say it, but it's the only way I can really think of it. Like everybody knew us. Like when we were somewhere else besides the dairy, it'd be like, oh, dairy crew, right? There's a dairy boy. And we were just small town famous in a way. Then for me, things kind of changed a little bit. I got to a point where like I had a kid, right? Because June was born while I was working at the dairy. And I asked if I could work like 7 days a week because I like needed money. And I said, I'll work every day. I don't care. Open to close or open to, whatever, 5 to 2, 5 to 3, whatever it was. I don't remember what the shift was, but I said, I'll do it. I'll work 7 days a week. So for, I want to say about 6 months, maybe longer, I was working 7 days a week. And then one day I walk in to check the next week's schedule and I have 2 days. Now, I mentioned earlier about people hiring family and then you getting the short end of the stick, right? So this basically, Jim hired his daughter first, and then hired his daughter's boyfriend, and got rid of one of our friends. I won't mention, but we got rid of one of our friends. Said they were stealing cigarettes. They weren't. Other people were, but they weren't. And then cut my hours to 2 days a week. That's a tactic that bosses use to get people to leave, right? And so I said, hey, why am I going? I have a kid to take care of. Like, why? I can't afford this. Like, I need to work at least 5 days. Like, can you cut me down? Can you put me up to 5 days? He's like, well, unfortunately, I can't. And I look at his daughter has 5 days. His daughter's boyfriend has 5 days. And I got cut to 2 days. And he's like, I just don't have the hours anymore. I'm like, yeah, but I've been here for like 6 years and you're cutting me. Now, it turns out that was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, but I didn't look at it that way. I should have left, right? I should have went and found a real job. Well, what I did was I walked down the street to the liquor store, which I used to go in all the time because the dairy only sold beer. And if I wanted liquor, I'd have to go down there. And I knew the guys down there and I asked them for a job. They hired me on the spot. I guess they were looking for somebody. So I went over to the dairy and said, fuck you, I'm out. You're not going to fucking give me hours, I'm out. And he was like, okay, well, sorry to see you go. Like all the time I'd put in, all the shit I'd done. And I felt like I was doing a lot of bad shit. So it was like, okay, maybe that was a good thing. I really wasn't. I was a good employee, but I was also doing shit I shouldn't have been doing. So I went down to the liquor store and I worked there for about a year. I won't get into details about that, but I worked at the liquor store for maybe less than a year, I want to say, but I worked there for a while. And I was working there 7 days a week, and I was working about 4 or 5 of those days, I want to say was 12 hours. So the way they paid me over there was, it was like $6 an hour, but then the rest, anything over 40 hours was under the table. So I was getting just cash so that he didn't have to worry about like taxes and stuff like that. So, but I was making, okay money. Now that I look at it, it wasn't great money for working as much as I was, because I was only making like $6 an hour, but worked there for about a year. And then my brother asked me, he told me that Jim got fired for embezzlement. Basically, he was stealing money. And Vicky and Larry wanted to see if I wanted to come back to work there because they felt like what Jim did to me was wrong because they liked me. And then I went back. I said, yeah, I'm going to go back to the dairy. And so I quit the liquor store. I basically gave him like a week and said, okay, I'm leaving. And I went back to the dairy, and then the dairy said, they're not going to hire me. And I was like, wait, you said you were going to hire me. They said, no, we changed our mind. And then so I tried to go back to the liquor store the next day, and they were like, no, we can't because we just hired our cousin from Cambodia. And I was like, fuck. Now I was screwed with no job. But long story short, I begged them for a job. I said, look, let me run your Lancaster dairy, right? Or let me work at the other stores. And they were like, well, are you willing to drive to Little Rock or willing to drive to Lancaster? I was like, yes, just let me work. So when I went back to the dairy, I worked mostly at the other stores. So I went over to the Little Rock. It was a Little Rock. It wasn't really a dairy. It was just a store. We called it the Little Rock Dairy. But I worked over there for a little while, and that place was horrible. Like the lady that worked there had been there for like a million years before they bought it, and she wanted things done her way, and she just wanted everything. Like she was the only one that worked there for the longest time, but I had to work there on her days off. Like she wanted to start taking a few days off, and that's why I started working there. And that store was just like basically it was just a gas station. People would come in and shop, and it was just the most boring shit ever. And every time they'd come in, they're like, I think her name was Susan. Where's Susan? You know, like all these rednecks come by. Where's Susan? But I worked there mostly. And then Larry asked me one time, he's like, there's a lot of people. He comes to me one time and he says, there's people stealing from my store. I know it. And I just don't know how they're doing it. So I need you to figure it out. So I want you to work at the Little Rock store because there's people stealing from there. And I want you to work at the Lake L.A. store. And I want you to find these people that are stealing because I trust you. Little did he know that, like, I invented it, you know, and I was one of the ones that started it. Like I said, I don't want to incriminate myself, but, and I'm not admitting to anything, but there's things that I did that he was trying to get me to find the people doing it when I had taught these people how to do it, you know? So it's like, come on. He got the wrong person. But I said, okay, no problem. So, I was doing that for a while, and then there was no one that I caught because he asked me a few months later. He's like, so what did you find out? I was like, man, I can't figure anything out. I don't know who's doing it. And I knew. I mean, geez, it was like obvious. Like I knew the people that were doing it. But after that, it was kind of time to leave. I think I'd been there for a little less than a year the second time. And by that time, it was no one really working there that, everybody had gone their own way. And, I started like working there 4 days a week or something like that, and then delivering pizzas at Big Al's. And I was like, why am I just still after, like 7 years, and by that time, like my son was born, so I had 2 kids. And it's like, why am I just making this shit money and like, staying in Lake L.A. It's because I was scared to do anything else. And that's the honest truth. Like I was scared to go anywhere else. It's all I knew. And I was just scared to go anywhere else. I just didn't want to try to go into Palmdale and find a job, But what I ended up doing was, or what ended up happening was they sold it. They sold the store. They sold the dairy. I think they kept the Little Rock one, or I think they just kept the Little Rock one. They didn't keep the Lancaster one, but they sold the Lake L.A. one. And he just said that, yeah, I'm not making money and I can't figure it out. So he sold it. And the people that bought it, I didn't want to work for them. I met them and I just was like, no, this isn't going to work for me. I can't do it. I don't want to work for these new people. And I quit, and like a couple other people quit. My brother was one of the only people to stay working there, and he worked there for a while with them, and he actually liked them. He actually liked working for them. So I just said, this is my sign to say, look, I got to go. I can't keep doing this. I got to fucking get out of the dairy. I got to do something else. So I started delivering pizzas full time at Big Al's for a little bit before I could figure something else out. And I said, you know what? I am going to go to school. And so I quit Big Al's, wasn't working at all. And I decided, okay, for a year I went to school. So that didn't work out because then after I finished school, I ended up working at Walmart. So, I mean, it wasn't like the school didn't do anything for me. But the time at the dairy, like I said, I worked there way too long, but it was a good time. And it was a job that taught me a lot. Like it taught me a lot about sense of urgency. especially working overnight, like trying to get everything done. And then like, I realized like, I have to get this done, get this done, and get this done, and get this done. And this is shit that I've learned in other jobs and used to this day, right? Sense of urgency, getting shit done in a timely manner, that kind of stuff, right? And the dairy was the first job that I learned that. And it was also a place where we were legends for a while. We were dairy boys, we were dairy crew. And it felt good to be like small town famous for a while, and it was just like, and I don't know if anybody thinks that. I look back and I say, okay, like we would be driving and people knew my car. People knew when we were out, people knew that we worked at the dairy, and people knew us in the town. And like I said, we could do whatever. Just come to the dairy. We'll hook you up with something. We'll help you out. We knew everybody in town. Everybody in town, our crew knew. The drug dealers, the gangsters, the tweakers, like we knew someone that could do something, right? Or that could get you what you need. So that's what the dairy was to me. I feel like good memories of working at a place that taught me a lot about work, but also taught me a lot about myself, and looking back thinking like, why was I this way? And how could I change who I am? Because I thought about the things I did. I was like, I think about it now. I'm thinking like, it's like I say a lot with my past, it's like, it seems like a movie. And a lot of the stuff that happened at the dairy doesn't seem real. Like, did we really do that? Like, I don't know. If there's any stories that I didn't talk about, because I know there's a lot I probably missed. I tried to think about more, and I was just like, it was kind of just a fun time. I just wanted to talk about stuff like that and kind of how I got started there. Maybe I'll make a dairy part 2. Just hit me up with any stories you think of. My brain sometimes can't remember. But anyway, that's it for me. I love you guys. Hope you enjoyed this episode.